Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. Oh, you know we got to find a way to bring some love here today. Father, Father, oh, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. Don't you know we got to find a way to bring some love here today? Yeah, yeah. Ticket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on, or what's going on. You tell what's going on, I'll tell you what's going on. Father, Father, everybody thinks we're wrong. Oh, but who are they to judge us? Simply 'cause our hair is gone. Oh, you know we got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Yeah, yeah. See, picket lines, picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. Yeah, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. Ooh. What's going on? Oh, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Oh, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on.
Please pray with me. As I know there is one God, one allness, one everything that permeates, that creates. I know that that one breathes me. And as I know this for me, I know this for everyone in this room, everyone hearing my voice. We are one. So I know that today is blessed. Blessed for all of us that are in it, because we make it so. We create our heaven right here with every thought, with every deed. Every hand that went into making this service, blessed it. The sound team, the recording, the practitioners, the volunteers, the ushers, Reverend Jen as a conduit of spirit in a way that only she can be. I know that whether we are gathered here together in this moment, or someone is hearing my voice later, or they're in a synagogue today or on a mountaintop, we all gather. We all connect. And when we connect with our source, we connect with each other, making love and forgiveness superpowers. So I know that this service is blessed. And we ground this by saying, and so it is. My words of inspiration today come first from Christian Sorensen. Forgiveness paints a picture of a world where suffering is over, loss becomes impossible, and anger makes no sense. And paraphrased from Brené Brown, anger is a catalyst. It's an emotion that we need to transform into something life-giving: courage, love, change, compassion, justice. Sometimes anger can mask difficult emotions like grief, regret, or shame. And we need to dig into that to see what we're really feeling. Either way, anger is a powerful catalyst, but if stayed in, is a life-sucking companion. And from the Honorable Dr. Ernest Holmes, all irritation and agitation are mental in their cause, and a sense of calm and peace alone can heal them. Fear is an intense emotion, and if bottled up, secretes poison into the system. Anger, malice, vindictiveness, and kindred emotions are but subtle forms of fear, arising from a sense of inferiority. All these emotions must be swept off the board if one is to gain peace, calm, and poise, the union of which alone can give power.
Imagine for just a moment that you're walking out of the grocery store and you have your hands filled with bags of those beautiful purchases you just made. And you're considering where you left the car for a second. And you turn to the right and bam! Somebody walks right into you. And you drop your groceries. And as you're looking at the ground and you see the eggs that have spilled onto the pavement, you're thinking, what in the world just happened, and why wasn't that person looking out for me? And you start to feel this bubbling coming up inside you, this anger. And you kind of shake it off for a second, and as you go to stoop down to start to pick up your groceries, you look, and to the right of you, you see an individual sitting on the ground. And their very dark glasses have been knocked askew. And a few inches from them on the ground is a white cane. And in that breath, in that moment, that nanosecond, that rage, that anger that was starting to do this just went phew. And what happens to us in that space is we go, well, I was clearly not looking where I was going. We begin apologizing. We start to help the individual up, and we take full responsibility for what happened. Oh, if the expressions of anger could dissipate so quickly in our lives. Anger is an emotion that is triggered. Something takes place. Maybe it wasn't what we expected. Maybe it's shocking. Maybe it's a surprise. Maybe it's more of the same old nonsense. Difficult to say. And we get triggered. And then what do we do with that? What is that place we go to next? Our talk title today is Looking Anger in the Eye. The picture on the screen is an Angry Bird. I never understood that game, but whatever. It's about a bunch of angry birds. Anyhow, I thought it was a good picture of anger because the other ones I picked up were just not fitting. So think about it this way. When we start to feel that energy, that anger starts to bubble up, becomes triggered, starts to manifest in our very being, it's almost like a storm, like a hurricane that is spinning. And if we allow it to, or feed it enough stuff, it will spin out of control. However, if we allow ourselves to step into the eye of the storm, we find peace. We find calm. We find accountability. We find opportunity to shift and to change that energy. Some of us think that we can't let go of anger until we blast off on somebody and tell them everything that we're upset about. That is simply not the truth. That is not the truth. Anger is also related to the fight, flight, and freeze response. It's a part of that keeping yourself safe response that the body goes into, the sympathetic nervous system and what it does. And so we're going to look at what we can do with this. What we can do with this by looking anger in the eye. Lawrence Wilder said, anger doesn't solve anything. It builds nothing, but it can destroy everything. So there's this mindset that says, okay, well, how about we do this? How about every morning when we wake up, we set the intention for the day? Maybe you do this already. Maybe it's part of your spiritual practice. And before you even get out of bed, you choose love, peace, kindness. This is my focus for today. This is what I'm going to aim for all day long. Once we do this, it doesn't matter what else shows up. It doesn't matter what triggers impact us throughout the day, because our choice has already been made to live in love, to express only peace. So when that energy shows up, when that challenge shows up, when that problem, when that guy isn't paying attention and he rear ends the vehicle, we don't have to jump into reaction mode, because we've already chosen how we're going to show up today. What a beautiful idea that has for us to support us in that way that says, are things going to happen? Sure. Are they going to tick me off every now and then? Yeah, probably. But can I still choose love? Absolutely. Absolutely. And in that space where many of us are in relationship, this is critical, this intention I'm talking about, because you have set, or we have set, an intention for that relationship. We have decided that this other individual or these other individuals and how we interact with them is so important that we don't want to do anything that could diminish or destroy that relationship. And yet, what seems to happen is, I didn't have breakfast, I'm tired, something else is frustrating me, I just got this weird note on my text messaging from the bank, and the other person says something, and we're right there. We're right there in conflict, chaos. So we really want to take time to look at how we can focus this differently. How can we choose a positive outcome for each day? And by simply setting that expectation of what you choose to experience and owning it, that's a huge piece of that. Prem Rawat wrote a book called Hear Yourself, and I've been reading it at the recommendation of Karen Townsend's husband. And I'm loving this book because everything he says is this philosophy, everything. But the quote I want to share with you is this: what you practice the most becomes easier for you. If you practice hatred, anger, ego, you will become perfect in them. If you practice love, kindness, forgiveness, you will become perfect in them. We talk a lot about our practices. We call them spiritual practices. Maybe that terminology doesn't work for you, but practicing what you want to have happen in your life, practicing the outcomes you want to have unfold, that's the key. And you don't just come out of the gate, or the womb as it is, and you got it all mastered. We have to work at it. We have to take steps. We have to move forward. So I want to just take a moment and look at, I don't know if I want to call this the psychological side. I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but the reality. I want to just talk about the reality. Because the personality of each of us has a lot to do with how we react and respond to things. And if we haven't found that beautiful concept of evolving into another expression of who we are, and we haven't transformed our lives to meet every concept that we choose to have, we're not quite there yet because we are a work in progress, so we haven't quite arrived. If we're not there yet, then there may be some things that we can learn from just knowing what are some of the things that show up in us habitually, behaviorally, that cause us to jump into anger, because the truth is, everyone in this room, everyone listening to this online could have the exact same experience, could see the exact same event, and we would all respond differently. Why is that? Well, there's a lot of reasons. I'm just going to talk about a couple. Research. I love research. This comes from research. Here are a few habits and attitudes that may be linked to anger. Now, we're all going to experience anger, so understand that, but let's just go through these. Entitlement. Believing that I have a right that you do not dare create an infraction with. I call it the how dare you. How dare you? How dare you treat me that way? How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you look at me that way? I remember when my kids were little, those words probably came right out of my mouth. Heaven help them. They grew up, they're fine. But I'm sure that I might have said that. So entitlement is one. Focusing on things outside of our personal control. Where is your focus? If it's out there, you're going to have challenges. And this month, we're talking about emotions all month long, so you're going to have challenges with all your emotions, yet anger is going to be a tough one. So to pay attention to what are we focusing on. If you come to a practitioner or to a minister and you're seeking prayer support and the first words out of your mouth are he or she and not I and me, that tells us your focus is on your partner, possibly, or your boss, or whomever, and not on what you can do, what you have control over. External regulation of emotions, trying to regulate your emotions by controlling your environment. Well, I'll just stay home. Oh, I'll stay home. Okay, well, that's not working to stay home. I guess I'll just go back to bed. I'll just go back to bed. And yes, do you have a little bit of control in that situation? Yes. But whatever's going on is still waiting for you. So we don't want to try and hide from it or escape from it. External loss of control. When something happens and externally, outside of yourself, something has happened. Something has impacted you, like the bumping into someone and dropping all the eggs. And in that breath of that example I was giving you this morning, you've already thought about what a pain in the behind it's going to be to go back in the store, buy the eggs, do whatever. Now you got to get new bags. These are all torn up. Whatever. We've already projected into those next moments. Refusal to see the other person's perspective. Refusing to see the other person's perspective. When we can see the other person's perspective, when we can come to an understanding of what they're experiencing, that's called compassion. When we live in that state of compassion, we can know that whatever's going on here, I may not quite get it, I may not understand it, but I can allow you to express this, I can allow you to feel this, and then we can move on. That's a big one. Low tolerance for discomfort. Goodness gracious. I don't know about you, but there are a whole lot of people in Colorado who were not happy about the snow. A whole lot of ranting, raving, now I've got to shovel, now I've got to cut down trees, now I have to trim limbs, now I have to. Oh my goodness, it snowed. It's Colorado. It does that a lot here. But we have got this dire need, and now we have these wonderful platforms. Aren't they amazing? God bless us. We have these wonderful platforms where we can just rant and rave on Facebook, Instagram, the 25 others that are out there. Low tolerance of discomfort. I had my air conditioning on for 2 days. My dog looked incredibly hot when we got home a couple of days ago from our walk, and she didn't seem to be cooling off, so I turned the AC on for her, because I'm that kind of a mom. And when I found out that it was going to snow, and I didn't know it was going to snow until someone texted me, thank you very much, but anyway, I got a text message, and I thought, oh my gosh, that means the temperature's going to drop. And as I could feel the temperature dropping, I turned off the air conditioning. And as it got later into the evening, I started thinking, well, I wonder how we're going to be by morning, but I just left the system off, and the next morning I woke up, and it was chilly. And I looked at Lotus, and I said, you look cold, and so I turned the heat on. I didn't have to complain about it. I didn't have to call 5 people. I didn't have to put a Facebook post out there. I adjusted to the discomfort until I was comfortable. See how easy that is? And I know that's kind of a silly perspective. It's usually something a lot bigger than that for us, but it's the same thing. We can shift. We can adjust. A hyper-focus on blame. I was so thrilled when I found this philosophy and found a philosophy where stuff happens, conditions happen, things are going on, and we can adjust, shift, change. We can accept, embrace, we can reject, we can change our thinking, we can move on. That's this philosophy. I don't have to blame anybody. I don't have to go find out who did what and why. I no longer have to investigate things. But when we're in that space, and we're in that constant place of thinking someone is to blame, that's going to ignite that anger pretty quickly. And then the last one I have on this list is a fragile ego. This is when we're working in that situation where that trigger happens every time the attention is pointed away from me, or someone is receiving accolades and gratitudes for something they did, and I'm thinking, well, what about me? I've done that and more. Or the ego could be that individual that's in that space that said, I can't believe they just went off and did that, and nobody asked me first. I strive constantly in my ministry to allow the people around me to do what they do, to show up and express the way they choose. And you're grateful, thank you. Why would I choose another way? Another way puts a whole lot of onus on me, a whole lot of energy on me, and now everybody's got to ask me permission for every darn little thing that's going on. No, we don't have that kind of time. But those are just some of the behavioral traits that we may see or be aware of in individuals who have a tendency to jump into anger. This quote is from our friend Unknown. You cannot see your reflection in boiling water. Similarly, you cannot see truth in a state of anger. For me, my experience has been that when I'm angry, I have already created a story and I'm reacting to it. And I have a tendency to find out later that that story wasn't the truth. We decide we know why someone did something. We decide we know what's going on. We decide we know why the individual bumped into us outside the grocery store because they weren't paying attention. And then we get more facts. And we discover that wasn't the truth. The interesting thing about anger is it is an emotion of action. Oftentimes it requires us to do something. So having a plan in place about how we're going to express that anger or how we're going to identify with that anger is really important for us. And I'd be willing to bet that there's no one in this room or even online, but or very few, that were taught those skills as children. I was taught that it wasn't appropriate to be angry. My dad got to be angry all the time. Not that he was an angry man, but he had, that was his right, he got to do that. I, on the other hand, wasn't supposed to ever demonstrate anger. In Brené Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, she says, there is an indication our propensity for anger and aggression is partially hereditary. Now, they don't have a lot of proof of this, and it's just a question that everyone's come up with, and those of you who've heard me talk about her book or know about her book, she's done an incredibly huge amount of research. And we'll be having a class on this. We're looking at possibly August now for Expressions of the Heart to be a new class for us. But what we are discovering is that some of these triggers are behaviors that we learned. We saw someone do this. We saw this behavior before. And now we're responding the same way. We know this works. We know how it works. Any one of you who has ever had a child or has a grandchild or has watched a small child, they are little mimickers of everything we do, including those negative expressions that maybe we wish they would not see or duplicate. Sharon Salzberg says, when you practice mindfulness of anger, when you feel it in your body, feel the complexity of it, the changing nature of it, you are working towards engaging with anger and all the emotions and thoughts that arise with presence and compassion. Then you can recognize the anger, capture the energy of it, and not fall into the fixation, bitterness, and greater hopelessness it can foster. Oh my gosh, I hadn't heard these terms till about a week and a half ago, and now I've been hearing them over and over again. Mindfulness of anger. Mindfulness of anger. That's just awareness, observing what's going on. What am I feeling? What's happening here? And then the engaging with anger. I would have never thought of it that way, that I was engaging with it. But if I'm ignoring it, if I'm disregarding it, and it's getting more and more and more triggered, it's gonna jump in and take over. It's going to be a challenge for me. I'm going to be expressing it. I'm going to be screaming, stomping my feet, whatever it is I do, before I realize that I could have maintained, contained, expressed it with love and compassion, and found a way to move through it or past it. We're also reminded in this moment to pause and breathe. Why would the emotion, anger, be any different than any of our other emotions? Just stop and take a breath. Stop. Take a breath. There are so many things that trigger us in our lives today that can cause us to react, respond, shout, send an email, heaven help us, send a text message, make a phone call, leave a voicemail message to express ourselves. Because we've been told, and I know you've all been told this because I've said it before, you've got a voice. We have a voice. Well, having a voice and offloading it on someone else with anger and contempt is not what we're talking about. So I'm not going to talk about all of the triggers that show up for us. I'm just going to talk about one right now. When we lose a loved one, that unbelievable trigger we call grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler wrote books and have a lot of information out there about the stages of grief. What happens when we have to let someone go? And it doesn't matter that you knew it was coming. It doesn't matter that they were ill for a long period of time. It doesn't matter how old they were. Loss is loss, and we've got to quit trying to mask over it with these little nuances that are meaningless, especially to the person who's hurting. On May 20th, 2006, I was in Detroit, Michigan, when I received the phone call about my stepson, Dusty. And I hate to use the word stepson, but it helps people to kind of place where he was in my life. But for me, he was my little boy. I came into his life when he was only just before his 4th birthday. And he was a part of my life until he was 20. And for me, what happened was it ripped me apart. It tore me apart. It was a violent crime. It was blasted all over the news. It was in the papers. It was, you might not remember papers. There's these things called newspapers. They used to print them. I don't know if we still do that or not, but anyway, it was everywhere. Everyone was talking. I couldn't engage with anyone without hearing something. And I felt like there was just this tearing open for me. And I had 2 sons who had thought of this young man as their little brother. And my 2 sons reacted in 2 very different ways. One son was heartbroken, in tears. Just that loss, that sense, that emptiness that we feel. He and I sat with his son, Tyler, and just held one another and cried for it seemed like hours over that sense of loss and the that feeling that it shouldn't have happened, it could have been prevented, but that isn't what took place. My oldest son was outraged. He was so angry that someone took his little brother away. He didn't take into account any of the stuff about Dusty's life and the way Dusty was living, because he wasn't living, he was living on the edge, let's just put it that way. He didn't take that into account. He was outraged, and he wanted someone to pay, or someone's, because we knew very early on that there were numerous people involved in the crime. I watched my family as we went through this process. And yes, there were times when I got angry. I got angry at myself. I could see all of the things that I did wrong. I got angry at my ex-husband because I had a really good list of all of the things that he had done wrong. I got angry at Dusty because he wouldn't listen, wouldn't change his mindset, wouldn't even consider getting the help and support I wanted to make sure he had to get him off the drugs and away from the world that he was living in. And isn't that a tough one for us when we go into that place and we get angry at the person we lost? And now we go into self-beat up because how dare I be angry with them? It's natural. I'm sorry, but it is natural to feel that. It is natural for us to go into that space and to be in that place. When finally, a few years later, the trials had taken place, the convictions, the whatever you call that, people went to jail, the time frame was set up for how long they were going to be in prison. I got a phone call from my oldest son. And he said, I don't feel any better. I really thought that once they got those people and locked them up, I'd feel better. And I don't. I didn't feel better either, because the young man who took Dusty's life, or was the one that got the greatest crux of the conviction, was only 17 at the time. Dusty was 20. And I knew another mother was in pain as well. Anger is a part of the grieving process. The challenge we have is there's no list that says you're going to have this one first, and then you're going to feel this one, and then this one's going to go, and then it's going to go away. Because it does go away, and then it comes back, and then it goes away, and then it comes back. And the only thing we can do to support ourselves in that process is to face it, to look at it, to recognize it, to look it in the eye and figure out, what does this mean to me now? All these years later, should it show up for me as anger now? What does it mean to me now? What can I take from this? What can I do with this? How can I shift, change, move on with this knowing? There is a book called Your Daily Shot of Espresso, written by a woman by the name of Jennifer Hadley. This quote is from her. "The anger I felt propelled me to find a spiritual solution, and that's led to the best part of my life." Kessler's book on the 6th stage of grief is about finding meaning, taking us to that next place. All these things happened, all of this anguish I've been through, all of this sense of loss, the anger, and what does it mean to me now? What can I do with it now? I have been able to support people in similar situations at a level I never, ever would have been before. I have reached an understanding of addiction that I would have never known before. So there's always something that we can bring from this and take forward. So this week, I invite you to figure out what your spiritual practice is. And again, you might not call it spiritual. It might just be something you do that helps you stay centered, that helps you stay grounded. Maybe it's grabbing your mandala coloring book and coloring. Maybe it's listening to some really cool music from high school. I think I was in high school when that earlier song was played, was popular. Maybe it's about reaching out to someone who can support you, someone who can just listen. Maybe it's about having someone who you can pray with, if that's what serves you the most in that space. But what I want you to remember is, you're not abnormal. There's nothing wrong with you if you are feeling and experiencing anger. When I have an expectation, sometimes I don't even know it, and something goes amok and it doesn't happen the way I want it to, there is this instant reaction in my gut, instant. And now I get to work through that. Our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, said this, and you heard part of this quote with what Leslie shared earlier. When our minds are filled with thoughts of anger, hatred, and resentment, we are pouring into our body poisons in the making. Anger can be turned into love. There's a lot of anger in the world today, a lot. And our job is to help shift that, change that, turn that into love, an expression of love. How can I express love in the midst of people who are angry with one another? What can I do? How can I hold that space? So let's take time this week and look at that. Because those toxins, that poison, is another part of what's wrong with many of us. Because when we allow it to enter the body, and we don't do what we can to release it and move through it, it starts to take a toll on us physically, emotionally, and mentally, and spiritually, of course. So find peace. Seek love. Look at the power and the ability you have to master this emotion. Mindfulness, engaging with it, and quit making yourself wrong because you got mad. I'm going to close with a very brief little story here. A man died, and he went to heaven. And he was met by St. Peter at the pearly gates. And St. Peter said to him, "You know, to give us a more complete picture of you, could you just tell me one incident from your life that showed you to be of high character, noble, and courageous?" So the man kind of thought for a second. He goes, "Well, yeah, I think I can." And Peter's like, "Okay, well, tell me." And he said, "Well, I was at a truck stop, and I came upon a group of bikers, and they were harassing this elderly man. And immediately I was so outraged, and I wanted to do something, and I didn't want to just lash out at them in anger, but I felt that I needed to do something to try to protect this man." And St. Peter said, "Okay, so what did you do?" And he said, "Well, I kind of went over and I leaned on the first motorcycle. And leaning on that motorcycle caused it to tip over to the next motorcycle, and then it tipped over to the next motorcycle, and then pretty soon, in succession, all of their bikes had fallen over." And St. Peter's like, "Wow, that did take some courage. How long ago did that happen?" And the man said, "Oh, 2 minutes ago? Love this week. Join me in prayer, please. And so as we close this time together today, we do so with that knowing, with that realization, with that acceptance and awareness that Spirit is everywhere present. That there is a divinity, a divine presence in, of, and through all things, and it permeates all life. The sky, the clouds, the ground, the trees, the nature, the birds, our voices, our very being, all of it is God. All God and all good. And so today we lift our hearts with joy and laughter, knowing that we get to be happy and we get to be joy-filled and we get to be filled with love and compassion as we walk this walk on planet Earth. And we do this knowing that we can face our anger. We can do the work that when the emotion shows up, we can handle it, we can deter it, we can shift it, we can move through it. And we can avoid the chaos and the conflict and the violence that seems to take place so often on this planet where anger is concerned. How beautiful to know this. How amazing it is to be able to come together and realize that we're not so different, and it's all okay, and it's all good, and all is well. And so I simply release these words onto the law, onto that divine mind that oversees all life, knowing it's already done in the mind of God. It's perfect, it's good. We just let it go and we let it be, and together we say, and so it is.
A little something from Peter Gabriel. Here we go. Feel free to clap along. I think you'll feel it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Climbing up on Salisbury Hill, I could see the city light. Wind was blowing, time stood still. Eagle flew out of the night. He was something to observe. Coming close, I heard a voice. Standing, stretching every nerve. Had to listen, had no choice. I did not believe the information. Just had to trust imagination. My heart was going boom, boom, boom. Hey, he said, grab your things, I've come to take you home. To keep in silence, I resigned. My friends would think I was a nut, turning water into wine. Open doors would soon be shut. So I went from day to day, though my life was in a rut, till I thought of what I'd say, which connection I would cut. I was feeling part of the scenery. I walked right out of the machinery. My heart was going boom, boom, boom. Hey, he said, grab your things, I've come to take you home. When illusions spin a net, I'm never where I want to be. And liberty, she pirouette. When I think that I am free, watch my empty silhouettes, who close their eyes but still can see. No one taught them etiquette. I will show another me. Today I don't need a replacement. I'll tell them with the smile on my face, man. My heart was going boom, boom, boom. Hey, I said, you can keep my things, they come to take me home.
Hello, I'm Reverend Jen Wild, Senior Minister for New Dawn Center for Spiritual Living. New Dawn Center is a global community, and we welcome all people, all paths, all ways of thinking, all philosophies. So know that you are welcome here, and thank you for joining our online community.